Hello everyone, my name is Akansha and I am your science teacher and the topic is cell. Now the first question is what is cell? So a cell is the smallest living unit of an organism, right? Which means every plant, animals and human body is made up of cells, or we can say that without cells life cannot exist. First of all, it is basic unit of life. This means a cell is the smallest unit that can perform all the life activities such as breathing or respiration, eating and digesting food, growing, reproducing, and responding to the environment, right? And even a single cell like bacteria can live on its own and encourage growth. For example, bacteria, which is one cell, is a complete living organism. And on the other side, humans, trillions of cells working together, is another organisms. So it doesn't matter whether it is one cell or a unicellular organism or it is multicellular organism. Now, why it is called structural unit of life? This structural unit of life. This means cells are the building blocks of all living organisms. Just like bricks made a house, cells makes the body. For example, many muscle cells make the muscles tissue, many nerve cells makes the nervous tissue, and many tissues make organs, right? For example, heart, brains, and lungs. And many organs makes an organism, right? For example, humans, plants, animals. And now why it is called functional unit of life? This means all life functions, that is work done by our body, happens inside the cells, right? Which means each cell performs specific functions to keep the organism alive. For example, red blood cells carry oxygens, nerve cells send messages, and white blood cells fight germs, right? And leaf cells in plants make food, which is also the process for photosynthesis, right? So we can say that our cell is the smallest living unit that forms the structure of body and perform all the life activities. Okay. Now, do you know anything about history of cell? So Robert Hooke was an English scientist who lived in 17th century, and he was interested in studying tiny objects using a microscope. Now, what did he discover in 1665? So, in 1665, Robert Hooke examined a thin slice of cork. Now, what is cork? It is a part of tree. Okay. So, he saw many tiny box-like compartments, and these compartments reminded him of the small rooms. Okay, which he called them cells. So, the important point to remember is that the cell he observed were dead cells because cork is a dead plant tissue, and he did not see living contents, only the outer boundaries he can see. Okay. So why is his discovery is important? Because he was the first person to use the word cell in the biology. Okay, and his discovery laid the foundation of for the cell biology. Later, the scientists studied living cell and developed the cell theory. Okay, so we can say that Robert Hooke discovered and named cell in 1665 by observing cork under a microscope, and he saw only the cell's wall of dead cells. But his work opened the door for the study of living cells. Right? Now, there are two types of organism. One is unicellular and other is multicellular. So unicellular are those organisms which are made up of single cells, right? For example, bacteria, amoeba, etc. And multicellular organisms are made up of multiple cells. For example, humans and higher animals, right? Now, this talk about two scientists who made very important discoveries about cell. First is Anton van Leeuwenhoek, first to see living cells. So Louis van Hoek was a Dutch scientist in the 17th century, and he made very powerful microscopes by himself. Okay, and by using these microscope, he was the first person to observe living cell. Okay, and what did he see? He observed bacteria in water, blood cells, sperm cells, tiny living organism. Okay, and the most important point is that he proved that living organism exist at the microscopic level. Okay, his work helps scientists understand that life is made up of tiny living units. Okay, Now the second scientist was Robert Brown. Robert Brown was a botanist. In 1831, he observed plant cells and discovered a dark round structure inside them. As you can see in this picture, he named this structure nucleus. Now, why is the nucleus called the brain of the cell? Because the nucleus controls all the activities of cell. It contains genetic material DNA, which carries instruction for growth, development, and reproduction. Right? So, in simple words, we can say Ludwig van Hoek first to see living cells, and Robert Brown discovered the nucleus, the controller center of the cell. Now, can you tell me something about cell theory? So, there were two scientists, Schilden and Schwann. Okay. So, in 1833, Schilden studied plant tissues under a microscope. And in 1839, Schwann studied animal tissues under a microscope. So, both the scientists carefully observed the structure of plants and animals. Okay. And they discovered something very important. What they have discovered? That both plants and animals are made up of cells. Okay. This was a big scientific breakthrough because before this, people did not know that all living things had the same basic building blocks. Okay. So in 1855, Rudolf Virchow worked with the ideas of earlier scientists like Schilden and Schwann and added a very important new principle to the cell theory. What he observed, he stated that all the cell arise from the pre-existing cell. Now, what does this mean? That new cells are not formed spontaneously. Every new cell is formed by the division of an existing cell. Okay, this explains that how growth, repair, and reproduction happens in living organisms. Right? Now, these are the three main principles of cell theory. Okay, so first is all living organisms are made up of cell. Right? This means that every plant, animals, and human is made up of one or more cells. Okay, and some organisms are unicellular, single celled like bacteria, and others are multicellular like human trees, etc. Okay, now the second principle is that cells are the most basic unit of life. Right, this means the cell is the smallest unit that carry out all life processes such as respiration, nutrition, growth, excretion, and reproduction. So no structure smaller than a cell can perform all the life functions independently. Okay, for example, organs are made up of tissues and tissues are made up of cells. So we can say that cells are the basic unit. Okay, and the last one is cells only come from the division of pre-existing cell. What does this mean? This means that new cells are formed by the division of existing cells, right? And cells do not arise spontaneously. And this explains how the body grows, how the living organisms reproduce, right? For example, the skin cell divide to replace dead cells, and a single fertilized egg divide to form a whole human body, right? Now, there are two types of cells on the basis of nucleus. First is prokaryotic cells and second is eukaryotic cell. So, prokaryotic cells are ones which do not possess a true nucleus, whereas in eukaryotic cells, true nucleus is present. These are generally small in size. These are generally large in size. They are mostly unicellular prokaryotic cells, and these are mostly multicellular. Membrane-bound organelles are absent in prokaryotic cells, whereas in eukaryotic cells, membrane-bound organelles are present. Single chromosomes are present in prokaryotic cells, whereas in eukaryotic cells, more than one chromosomes are present. Right? Now, this is the diagram of animal cell. So, an animal cell is a type of eukaryotic cell, which means it has a true nucleus and membrane-bound organelles, but it does not have a cell wall or chloroplast like plant cell. Like as you can see, this is the cell membrane. Now, what is cell membrane? It is a thin and flexible outer boundary of the cell, and it controls what enters and leaves the cell. Okay, and it maintains the cell shapes and protect it. Okay, second is cytoplasm. This jelly-like fluid inside the cell is called cytoplasm. All the organelles floats in the cytoplasm. Okay, and most of the chemical reaction occur in cytoplasm. Okay, now this is the nucleus, the control center of the cell, right? And it contains DNA, genetic material, and it controls growth, metabolism, and reproduction, right? Now this is the nuclear membrane which surrounds the nucleus. Okay, and it has pores that allows materials to move in and out of the nucleus, right? This is nucleolus, which is found inside the nucleus, and it produces ribosomes which help in protein synthesis. Okay, this is mitochondria. You know what is the other name for mitochondria? It is also known as powerhouse of the cells, right? And it produces energy ATP through respiration. So more mitochondria is equals to more energy needed. Now, now the other thing is ribosomes. No, these are the ribosomes. Tiny structure found free in the cytoplasm is known as ribosomes. So this is endoplasmic reticulum. So there are two types of endoplasmic reticulum. One is rough and other is smooth. Rough endoplasmic reticulum has ribosomes on its surface and it helps in making and transporting protein. Whereas in smooth endoplasmic reticulum, it does not have ribosomes. And it helps in fat synthesis, detoxification, and calcium storage. Okay. And this is lysozyme. It is also known as suicidal bag of the cell because it contains digestive enzymes and it breaks down waste material and worn out all the organelles. Okay, and that is why it is called suicidal bag. Now this is the plant cell. A plant cell is also a eukaryotic cell with some special parts that help plants make food and stay firm, right? So this is the cell wall, the thick outer layer made up of cellulose, and it gives shape, strength, and protection to the cell. Okay, okay, and there is cytoplasm inside the cell. Thin layer just inside the cell wall is known as jelly-like a fluid inside the cell is known as cytoplasm, and all the organelles float in this. Okay, there is nucleus, there is nucleolus, right? You know what is nucleolus, which is present inside the cell and which produce ribosomes. And this central vacuole, it stores water, food, waste, and pigments. Okay, and it maintains pressure, which keeps the plants upright. Okay, so now you understand the function of cell membrane, that it is the outer membrane of cell that controls the movement in and out of the cells, right? Now, what is cell wall? Most commonly found in plants and bacteria, and it supports and protects the cells. Okay, this is nucleus. Okay, that controls all the activities of cells, right? And it is separate from cytoplasm by nuclear membrane, and it contains all the genetic material, for example, DNA, right? Now there is chromosome. It carries genetic information and provides essential nutrients for the cells, right? This is nucleolus, which is present inside the cells and it contains RNA to build proteins. Cytoplasm, cytoplasm. It surrounds the cell membrane, right? And it contains hereditary material. like DNA, right? As I've told you, endoplasmic reticulum, there's two types, smooth and rough. Smooth lag ribosomes and rough ribosomes embedded on the surface. Okay, and as you can see in this diagram, these are ribosomes which are embedded on the surface. This is mitochondria, and what is the other name for mitochondria? It is also known as powerhouse of the cell, right? And it recycles and decomposes proteins and fats, right? Now these are lysosomes. What is the other name for lysosomes? These are known as suicidal bag. Okay, these are vacuoles that helps plants to maintain shapes, right? This is chloroplast. It is usually found in plant cells, and it contains green chlorophyll. Okay, so thank you.